Sports minds, people focused. Welcome to the arena in the boardroom, where we plan to bridge the world of sports and business. I'm pumped to have this platform ready to launch, and a lot of the time ideas, they sound great in concept, but this is coming to fruition in a way where I believe it can make some real impact. During my stretch of unemployment where I went through 700 applications, and that is a pretty accurate number because I stopped counting at 648, and interviews where I was trying to project unsuccessfully how I could be an asset to the same places I interviewed with, I realized that perhaps my messaging, among other things, was just not getting through in those settings. Enter this platform. Before we continue, I will not be the only voice that uses this space. My plan and genuine hope is to have other regular guest contributors who are willing to share their expertise from the world of athletics and bring it into the world of human capital. Anyway, I'm Brandon, the producer of this platform and one of the voices you will be hearing. At this very moment, I'm a doctoral student at Drexel University studying human resource development. My dissertation, talent acquisition practices in the NFL and how they can be best applied to a professional organization. Work will always be work, but I do have interest, which sparked my desire to research and my desire to do something with it. This platform is just part of that. We move forward by sharing knowledge, not gatekeeping it. That being said, there are a lot of topics to cover. I personally have a lot to say, and I just happen to have a brand new studio in the office where I work from home. However, this will not be just a place to share opinions, air grievance, or have an agenda. The design here is to have a place where thoughts, ideas, and shared experience will combine to provide something that is useful for anyone who tries to engage us. Okay, so that's a good outline of why this platform exists, but the reason this platform has a sports angle to it is because sports can provide a great template for many of the functions of society. Go ahead and pick one. Teamwork, team building, management, growth, development, any adjective you would like to attribute an example from sports can be brought to it. Now, before you roll your eyes, don't expect to be told how to do things or be given an endless amount of cliches of why these practices are going to work. I myself, and many of the others I hope will be on this platform, are former coaches or administrators in their respective sports. We understand team dynamics, adaptation, and how quickly things can change. I'm 29. Coaching was how I spent the first decade of my career. Yes, believe it or not, I myself have lived an entire career before I turned 30. I've also finished school almost 3 times. I've been through contract negotiations, contract disputes, union interactions, hirings, firings. Like I said, there are many topics that we are going to cover in this space. Other voices will bring their own stories, experiences, and perspectives, and we will all pledge to do so as responsibly as possible. Now, as for the format, it will be loosely structured. We won't have a schedule for the content. When something gets posted to this platform, we want it to be of quality and of value. We all have our interests. I am personally going to be leaning very heavily into what I'm doing my doctoral research on, those parameters of team building and human capital management. I will also weave in some real-time case studies and share some personal perspective as well. My co-hosts may be completely different both in content and in regularity. The beauty of this space is that it is designed to engage, not entrap. I won't foreshadow what is coming in the future except to say that people evolve, and as a result, so will we. So thank you, first off, for the invitation into your speakers and to your mind. Connect with myself or this page on LinkedIn and consider this an open invitation to challenge anything you hear from us. Our topics, thoughts, and opinions are not absolutes. All right, so the good news is if you made it this far into the introduction, I do have an actual topic for us to discuss today. We are officially post-NFL draft. No, this is not going to be a recap of the weekend. This is going to be an application of the implications of how the NFL draft works and why it is relevant to anyone who manages human capital, and especially to those who designate themselves as talent acquisition professionals. From my vantage point, the NFL draft is a key component of my doctoral research, as it is the primary way that NFL teams bring in new players on an annual basis. So you are probably asking, why is this relevant to any outside organization? The NFL is a unique entity that is more or less incomparable to any job outside of professional sports. While that is true, its talent acquisition practices are unmatched. But first, before I continue, from here on out, the words that I will refer to as talent, I will be referring as personnel as often as I can. NFL teams do not have a talent acquisition team. They have a personnel department, as do most athletic entities. If they're in line to be drafted, the talent part is just implied. So I say this in part because it's rooted in my research, but it's also the most practical way to view the people who are coming in and currently in your organization. Personnel departments in sports, and in particular this case the NFL, manage the personnel on the team. A simple reframing of that concept can help put some of what I plan to discuss in this episode and going forward into practice. So let's go back to the draft. I want you for a second to imagine, as an organization, if you had one day per year where all of your personnel decisions, who you hired onto your team, was broadcasted for public consumption. It gets better. You then have other professionals who have knowledge of your industry, what it takes to be successful within it, all spending time on national television dissecting and critiquing every single hire you've made that day and explaining to the audience why it will or won't work based on what is publicly known to everybody. That sounds pretty awful, doesn't it? Now, if that was your scenario, though, what would you change about how you hire? That's a very loaded question that I don't expect you to have an answer to, but in a nutshell, that is what the NFL draft is from the outside looking in. From the team perspective, it is the opportunity to select players that they believe can be difference makers in the now or in the future. The goal is to find value, cheaper labor, and assets that can be made into more than what they currently are. But in order to do so, there is a significant amount of work that takes place to be prepared to draft a single NFL player. In its concept, the draft is simple. Each team has a number of picks allotted to them, and when it is their turn, they can select any player who is available. That's an oversimplification, but at its core, that is the NFL draft. The lead up to it takes focus beginning in February from the public view, but the work on these players that are going to be selected typically begins years prior. Yes, to select a single player, the NFL team may have been scouting or recruiting, for those who are in talent acquisition at the moment. They may have been scouting that player since they were in high school, just to have every piece of available knowledge at the ready on the chance that they might be able to select that player in the NFL draft. That's a lot of ifs and maybes, and it sounds difficult and time-consuming. Yes, it is to all of those things, but when you think about why, an NFL team is a multi-billion-dollar entity, and each player represents a significant investment both in finance and in available roster space. The best players help teams win. They help sustain jobs, and they make a ton of money for the team that they are on. Poor player selections do the opposite, and careers are ruined in very short order. It's important. But how does that relate to an organization that is not an NFL team? There is no draft for you, and finding your employees is a much different process. But what holds so many companies and organizations back is the idea of, well, that may work for them, but there's no way we could do that, and it wouldn't work for us. Emulate, not replicate. There is no realistic way to compare the NFL to anything, even other professional sports. And honestly, I'm not attempting to do so with my research or even what I'm talking about right now or what I plan to talk about in the future. But taking elements from successful entities, retooling them to what you do can be the difference essentially between a win and a loss. So let's unpack that. What are your current hiring practices? Do you have a team of people that do the hiring, aka a talent acquisition team by name? Do you have just a single person? Is hiring done directly by the person who is managing the team? What is your interview structure? How do you find your prospects? These are all relevant questions to ask if your organization is struggling with its personnel, as there is often a reason. An NFL team's regime does not get an excuse for building a poor roster. So why should anybody in an organization? There is no 100% hit rate, and I'm not suggesting that you need to be perfect in your hiring or that all of your hires will or should pan out. In fact, When you look at the NFL draft, players drafted in the first round more often than not fail, but a well-built team can survive a poor selection now and again. If your organization is built the same way, a bad hire won't sink you. Inversely, if you're relying on a single hire to save you, that means there were likely a few errors in the team building process to get you to this point. The key is being prepared and knowing what you are getting. The reason NFL teams spend so much time learning about who they bring onto a team is because it matters. Team dynamics are fragile in sports, and when you think about it, in your organization as well. One bad character can hinder development and set all of your progress back. At least in sports, you can just cut people. There might be a financial ramification to deal with, but with the transactional nature of athletics, it makes it very easy to move on from a player that just is not working out. That is not always the case with employees within an organization. It can take forever to fire somebody who isn't working out, much to the detriment of the team that person is on. From the company perspective, it makes sense. Companies are trying to protect themselves from litigation and maintain their reputation so that people will continue to want to work for them. While fair, if that is the goal, then that means you should be making much more shrewd personnel decisions for your organization. There is no perfect template to people. Everyone is a variable, and in many ways they will perform based on the environment they are placed in. But remember, somebody had to select them in order for them to be in that environment. So if they fail, they had to be given the opportunity to fail, and that rests on the person who made the decision to bring them in. Think of the worst employee that you can imagine. I'm sure you could flash back to the interview that you had with them, and you would probably remember a few red flags that maybe raised your eyebrows or maybe made you have some second thoughts, but at the time, you just went with them instead of acknowledging them, thinking that they were no big deal. Take it very seriously. NFL teams, they spend all of that time gathering information so that they can make the right decision on a multi-million-dollar contract. So while the person that you might be hiring may only be worth $15 an hour, do you really want to deal with the headache of someone that's going to cause issues with other team members, show up late, or be just a general pain in the butt just because you're short-staffed and you really need somebody to take on these hours? Or are you going to do a few extra interviews, maybe dive a little bit deeper into what each person brings to the table, and make a selection based on fit rather than simply on need? To me, it's an easy decision. Having coached and seeing how poorly an entire season can go just because of a bad dynamic, I would much rather have a short-handed roster where everyone's got positive vibes and everyone is working collectively to be successful than have a full roster and lose sleep at night because I don't know what could happen the next day just because somebody has an unwillingness to be a team player. Take it all into consideration. No, you are not an NFL team, but you can operate some of your structure loosely like one. There's an excellent book that I will put the Amazon link to. Lex Sisney's How to Think About Hiring Play Smarter to Win the Talent Game has become foundational to what I'm researching. The system and how you hire is unique to you, but the principles of human capital are relatively uniform. No organization can function without people running it, and the level of importance you place on people can be the difference between success and failure, a win and a loss. On that, that's a wrap for this one. We have so many more topics we are going to explore, and I've already got the next one in queue. We're going to talk a little bit about HR and its functions, but until that one comes out, subscribe, follow, and thank you for listening to this first episode of The Arena in the Boardroom.